Hello, I'm Daniela Smallwood, and I want to welcome you to today's episode of Chef Talk. We're so excited because it is another month and we have the opportunity to have a great conversation that impacts the hospitality department as well as impacts our communities and our HBCUs. And so today we are going to be talking about the art of food activism. And a lot of times this is a popular term that's starting to trend, but we really want to kind of dig deep and understand what is food activism really, how can we be a part of that, and really have some conversations with people who are hands-on with that. So today we're going to be talking to documentary and filmmaker EJ Johnson. And he's going to be sharing about a project that he worked on. And the star of his documentary, Ples Mongotmery, is here with us as well. So welcome to Chef Talk. We're so glad to have you guys today. Dive right in, and we're going to start with EJ. So EJ, I just want you to start by just telling us a little bit about your background and your passion when it comes to filmmaking as well as photography.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for inviting us. Glad to be able to talk a little bit about this story and food activism and filmmaking. So I am in Dallas, particularly Oak Cliff. And so I've been an educator for many years, but alongside of that, also have a love for storytelling and history and learning stories and documenting stories, and particularly our community particularly. And so a few years ago, I guess maybe a little bit longer than a few years ago now, I started documenting the neighborhood of Oak Cliff through a project called the Oak Cliff Documentary here in Dallas, as a way to really just document the neighborhood that my parents grew up in. I lived in a lot of places growing up, but this was the neighborhood we were always being sent back to for the summers and weekends, and kind of looking at the neighborhood more, and also looking at its relation to the importance of Black and Brown stories and history in the city of Dallas. And so within that, I just been documenting a number of different stories and folks that are in the neighborhood, including Ples, who does a lot of work, particularly around food insecurity in the city. And so I literally think this was, I'm trying to remember I don't remember the first time I came out to like document some of the work that y'all are doing, but literally went out there with my camera, did an interview with him, took some photos and shared that on my social media platforms. But it was really clear the work that Ples and his team were doing, that there was a story here. And so as I began to move from photography into filmmaking, we were able to receive a grant from the city of Dallas to actually do a film that really looked at his work that he was doing. And this all coincides with the pandemic, which really just showed the need for this particular type of work and how folks can support food activism, and how many people in our community are really struggling to be able to receive those resources and nutrients that they need. And being an educator, I knew how that was a big deal with our students and being able to see the right nutrition, all those sorts of things. And so, but really, I'm just a person who loves documentary stories and telling our stories and documenting that. And so that's a little bit about my background, but yeah.
Excellent. And that's really helpful because you need these people, you need people who are willing to share the stories, tell the stories, which is, why we created Chef Talk, to be able to share important stories as well. And so, Ples, we understand that you are kind of the center around this particular documentary. And I'd really like to understand a little bit more about your background and what inspired you to become a food sovereignty activist.
All right, so Ples Mongotmery IV. I am. I'm actually not. I'm not these. I'm one of the stars of the documentary. The story truly features many people that do a lot of good work. One of our mantras with the Oak Cliff Veggie Project is cooperation over competition, and with this understanding that it truly does take a community effort to make this work even possible and make it successful. So my inspiration actually came from my mother. She is the co-founder of the Veggie Project. She started this whole thing off with her mission to. She was a nurse for many years of most of her career, and she wanted to influence the health outcomes of Oak Cliff. She is actually not native. She's a New Yorker herself, But my dad is my father, Ples Montgomery III, is a native Dallasite, and his family grew up in Oak Cliff. So as she again, as she always says, that she got a word that told her to feed the people, and she started by we put together family money. We bought some produce from an online food co-op and put up a sign that said free produce here in a church parking lot, the church that my family had gone to for many years. And that was the advent of the Veggie Project as it is now known today. At that point, it was just the food distribution. So that's where my inspiration comes from, specific to doing the work in with food sovereignty and food activism. I've always wanted to be able to do something that was going to be beneficial to my community, so that I could leave it better than I found it. I studied marketing and advertising as what I finished with in school, and was very much struggling with how I could reconcile that education and that skill set outside of mainstream capitalistic activities. And so in doing that, I kind of this found my mother found her way to this, and then I was able to find my way to it as well, and was able to find a space that overlapped with community work and work that was both meaningful to me, and that I could use the skills that I had learned in traditional education setting to make an impact. And yeah, so that's how I got into all this. Came into this thing in the same way that I came into the world, through my mother.
Just born into it. I love it. From generation to generation, if we're going to see change, no matter what area it's in, it goes from generation to generation. And I love the fact that both of you kind of talk about how it ties to your parents and how you've kind of picked up, something that was started in a generation before you. You've been willing to, be a part of positive change in your particular area. And so just, understanding, we'll start with you, Isha, to just kind of talk a little bit about how you've been able to utilize your platforms to spread awareness about food insecurity, how you've been able to do that. So we'll start with you, EJ, and then we'll go to Ples afterwards.
Absolutely. So I think social media is a powerful tool, and social media and media is really powerful for storytelling, and particularly for marginalized folks to really be able to tell our stories from our perspectives that have often been left out of larger narratives and storytelling. And so, like I said, so really, spending, I believe it was summer when I was first photographing Ples and his team, Oak Cliff Veggie Project, and seeing the work they were doing, and understanding as an educator the impact of having nutrition, food, and having those options for students, making sure they get those resources in the communities that we were working in, and what that looked like, and the disparity. And kind of think about all these things on top of the pandemic. I think there was a photo that went viral on Twitter of like a food distribution giveaway during the pandemic that was here in Dallas, and people's cars were lined up along the highway. And so it was and kind of the world was looking at Dallas, but this was happening across the country. So it was a story that I knew a lot of people could resonate with. And so I was like, so when I was able to talk to Ples and his team and other folks as well, that Ples mentioned, who were really doing this work and looking at how to provide these resources for folks in the community, but then also really giving tools to people in the community, right? Like actually creating, gardens in the community that folks can actually go to, that students can learn how to grow their own foods, and really, bring all this holistic approach to it is really transformative work. And so seeing that and knowing my love for storytelling, I knew that there was something there, and how can we do that? So then it kind of bring other folks into the conversation. I think our world is very visual. And so folks who, if they feel like they're a distance from the story or don't necessarily know what's going on, or in certain neighborhoods and community, but it's a way to really show folks what's going on, but then also really to elevate and amplify voices that are really doing this work. And how do we amplify those voices and support them in a way that more folks can get involved in this. And so, yes, that's where I kind of feel like my passion and like where I kind of fit into this work. And so a lot of the projects that I do, I'm really passionate about not just looking at the issue, but also really finding those voices that are doing the work and amplifying and centering those stories around those voices as well.
And I think that's important, because we all have a part to play in change. And sometimes, it might not be the part that we thought we should have or the part that we envisioned, but we all have a piece. And so speaking of that, Ples, how have you used your platforms to kind of amplify the work that you've been doing with the Veggie Project?
So for me, like I said, my training is in my traditional education was in marketing and advertising. And during this work with the Veggie Project, I would be invited to do meetings such as this, and they would always introduce me as a master gardener, and that is not actually the truth. I consider myself a cultivator and a warrior, in the fact that is my position and my purpose to protect and provide and prepare the community and my family for the right now and for the next generation. So this whole thing to me is I view it as a platform to amplify the voices of those who know how to do this work. So the one of the other young women in the documentary, Darcia Houston, is a very well traveled, well educated farmer and nutritionalist and wellness expert overall, specifically for melanated people. And so I see this work as providing space and opportunity for her to be seen by the community as the valuable resource that we truly need within our own community. People that are born of this space and took the time to educate themselves and are truly dedicated and wanting to build a better and a healthier community. So I use the other thing I use it for is that this whole platform is about kind of amplifying the need of the position that we are in as a community and as a society. Like there's a 40% waste problem in the current, in the food complex, the national food complex system, right? So from big farms to small farms, there's 40% of that food goes to waste from when it comes out of the ground or wherever it's grown to when it either gets to a kitchen table or a restaurant or a grocery store, right? And even from those grocery stores, a lot of stuff goes to waste that they make on a regular basis. So we don't necessarily have a problem with growing enough food for everybody to eat. We have a systems management problem. So like EJ was saying about creating opportunities and systems that allow for the building, the teaching of this, bringing this curriculum back into schools when it was something that was in schools and that had been taken out. So building a platform that allows for this to get back into the schools and allows it for it to be easier access, not only to the fresh produce. So to me, the food desert is not just that whether you have access to fresh produce or not. It's like, do you have access to the means, to the understanding of how to prepare that fresh produce and why it should be valuable to you, in addition to having it? Because there could be plenty of healthy food surrounding you, but if you don't know that it's healthy, if you don't know how to prepare it so that it remains healthy, then you're going to look at it or you're going to go right past it, right? So that is the purpose and the point of the Oak Cliff Veggie Project. Our things are cultivation, education, and preparation, so that we are learning how to move from food insecurity to food sovereignty as a local community. And by food insecurity, I mean not having access, not knowing what to do with it, not understanding the value. And then food sovereignty is a place where we are understanding why we should be in control of our food and having the tools to do that. We are a empowerment organization. We don't want to just be another charity that needs the community to stay in the same position that they are in, so that we can stay solvent by getting grants to offer a service to look at the community like, oh, these folks can't take care of themselves and they never will be able to take care of themselves, so they need us to come in here and provide this for them. No, we want to provide our platform is to empower the community to change their lifestyle and their positioning and the way they see themselves and how we all treat each other.
And I think that's so important. One of the things that we've done in Campus Dining by Thompson Hospitality, in the fall semester, we took some time and we took a whole month out to do a food insecurity awareness, to really focus on the food insecurity impact that we have on college campuses. A lot of times, people aren't always aware of the challenges that students have and the times that students are choosing between eating or, being able to get their degree, or having, food to eat, and being able to, eat good food for them, right? Food that's really going to allow them to grow. And then in this month, the same month that this airs, we're actually doing food waste campaign to really amplify how much food we're wasting in our dining facilities. So it's interesting that you're talking about how all of these pieces work together. There's not one that's separate from the other, but when we kind of pull them all together, that's when we're going to really see the elevation that we're looking for. So
absolutely.
That's excellent. And so, you really kind of talked about already like what food activism is. And, I love the 3 components that you talked about. So I want to dive into that. Our audience is primarily college students or students who are in higher education communities, specifically at our HBCU communities. And so how can they get involved in food activism?
So I would say that there are a number of, specifically in Dallas, well, maybe let me not even make it specific to Dallas. There are mutual aid organizations in Dallas, and I'm going to give the examples from what I know in Dallas. So there are mutual aid organizations that are not necessarily nonprofit organizations. They're not 501c3s, but they work on a very ground level. Like you could work to make food for the houseless community on a twice a week. Like there are groups that on Sundays they make hot plates for the houseless community. They do that using rescued produce, and that rescued produce is procured by a nonprofit that has the means to get that produce. And when I say get the rescue produce, this is like from a wholesale distributor that has a pallet of tomatoes, and each box of there's 50 boxes of tomatoes. Each box of tomatoes has 20, 25 tomatoes in it, and maybe 30% of that pallet is actually uneatable tomatoes, right? That humans don't need to consume. But from their rules, they have to throw the entire pallet away. So the pallet gets rescued, and then it gets distributed direct to the community or to mutual aid organizations or organizations like myself that can then make sure that it gets out into the community. The clean portions of it can go out into the community. So there are operations, there's food rescue operations they can get involved with. There's food distribution operations they can get involved with. Even down to saving coffee grounds, to rounding up coffee grounds from local coffee houses and taking those to community gardens, because the spent coffee grounds can be used as a fertilizer, a kind of fertilizer for growing food. So just participating in a community garden, a community farm site, finding out how much food is being wasted in your local systems, like at your grocery store, and going to the manager and saying, hey, I know about this group. I found out about this group that they could use the food that you guys are throwing away, like those ready to eat sandwiches and little boxes of soups and things that they make that don't go out for the day. Any of the produce that doesn't get sold for that day. Those things, there are a lot of rules in cities that say that those grocery stores actually have to throw those things away. But if your city does not have those rules, then you can find a nonprofit, see if you can help get them connected, or even working on the more political side of it, where you are advocating to have those rules changed in your city, so that the grocery stores now get the city council to change the policies that say, okay, you have to throw it away. No, you have the grocery store or the restaurant, you have to find a nonprofit or a mutual aid organization that will recycle this food for you and get it into the hands of people who are in need of it, whether that be a soup kitchen or just a pop-up food distribution that still saves that food. That way we are not creating so much waste. That's one of the easiest, like saving some of the food waste is one of the easiest ways to get into it. Not necessarily from a political side, because changing city policy is not an easy process. But if you are more politically minded and in that area already, that's a great way to go about doing things. We have people working in the back, because we're a nonprofit. There's certain things about politics that we cannot necessarily get involved in, but you as an individual can go out and go to the city council meetings and make those demands of the city council folks.
I think Ples has given us a very diverse background that those of you who are watching, you can think about how should I get involved? Where can I use my gifts and my talents and really plug into that, which, you know, even with EJ, what he's really done. So EJ, in your 2021 documentary, A Food Justice Story, it highlights the conversations that really surround equality and equity and access to the fresh produce in the Dallas, Texas community. And so you talked about kind of following their story and getting, following their story, but can you go into a little bit more detail of how you ended up actually creating this documentary that was funded by the city of Dallas?
Yeah. So the City of Dallas Office of Arts and Culture gave us a grant. And I think one thing when looking at a story is to try to get as many points of views and parts of the story together. It's like Ples has really been kind of laying out all the different ways in which people can get involved, and it's a lot that all ties together. And so, we were able to really dive into Ples's story, his mother, and it was also centered around a really large giveaway that they were doing and kind of building up to that, but then kind of following them along their journey and their work, and then also kind of hearing their story as, how they, grown, and especially during the pandemic as well. And another part of it was looking at other people and how they contributed to the story. And so we talked to Stacey Ellis, who's a dietitian. And so she talks about, how that her work that she does and really trying to educate folks and how we can use certain fruits and vegetables and how do we incorporate that into our diet, as well as the need for more Black dietitians, because there are very few Black dietitians, and kind of hearing that story of it as well. And then also looking at our culture. We oftentimes we hear about stories about healthy and not healthy foods in our culture, but then all of the healthy foods that are in our culture, and how do we elevate that? Like, how do we talk about that and eat those in a way that's really beneficial for our bodies? And then also talking to people that are in the communities. And so we got to do a great interview with the Lewis family, who's a mother and a son who really get to work with the one of the community gardens that Ples and Darcia, who's also in our film, who's a farmer, does. And so being able to hear the mother and talk from a mother perspective about what it means for her son to be able to go out and actually learn how to cultivate and work with the land and get to learn these skills. And what does that do on the social emotional learning for students and being able to actually be out in nature and be able to see this process? And now I'm thinking about it, the mother was talking about this process and what its benefits, how it benefits her son. And then Stacey, the dietitian, was also talking about how it's beneficial for people to actually grow their own foods and how you're more likely to eat those foods. So kind of hearing all these different perspectives. So when you bring in like the farmer, you bring in nonprofits, you bring in parents, you bring in children, you bring in dietitian, you can see a bit more of a holistic approach. And I think that that's like really key in telling our stories, is like getting all the voices, as many voices possible in the story, because it's a bigger story. Like I said, Ples is really outlaying the different parts of it, but they all intertwine together, and there's so many benefits when we talk about doing this work and talk about food sovereignty. Like I said, whether it's social emotional learning, growing your own crops, the actual benefit it does for you, to how you are helping your community, how you're making it more green. I mean, there's a lot of pieces that roll into this. So.
Excellent. And so you guys have laid out such a great foundation of the work that's being done in Oak Cliff, and how you all utilize this documentary to kind of elevate that work. So Ples, if you had to kind of think about over the time that the documentary has aired, how do you feel like this has impacted the work? Like, what do you really think that it's done to impact the work that you are currently doing? And for those of you guys who are watching, you'll notice Ples is on the move, and he is on the move because he's in between, and he took time out to have a conversation with us in between doing the work. And that's the type of people that we really want to be connected with. So if you can kind of share a little bit about that impact with us.
So the impact has absolutely been enormous. The griots of our time and on a local scale, small scale, they are so important to highlight these stories, because very often, even as powerful as social media is, the reach of it is only so far. Like, the word of mouth has been the hallmark of the work that we do. we have had so many people, we've been able to share it. The first airing was kind of a live, Facebook Live airing of the documentary. And we did a lot of publicity for that, and did an open panel with all the participants at the end of it. And since then, we've done a couple of showings of it to use it as a fundraiser for the Veggie Project, and was able to raise a little bit of money. But at every single one of those airings and showings, it was also featured on, it's been in several film festivals, won a couple of awards, and we also we showed it here in those fundraising mode, and that allowed us to at every single one of those events, we may have not gotten a like $10,000 check written right then, but it brought more people into what it is that we do. And they have since, they would call back or say that they wanted to provide whatever kind of in-kind service that they could, whether it was helping with volunteer coordination or grant writing, or collaboration with whatever their organization was, that they felt like there was some synergy that could be helpful for both of us. So that is the impact of being able to document a story, document an activity, something that is needed within the community is very paramount. And this actually goes back to the question you asked before about how you can be a food activist. Like there are so many ways, whether it's on the political stance or even just coming out and recording what it is that is going on and then sharing that out into the community. A lot of our funding right now comes from crowdsourcing, and I mean everything from doing a specific fundraiser on social media to the volunteers who come out and then go back to the corporations that they work for and putting us on the list of getting monthly donations or bi-monthly donations from that match their volunteer hours. And then that company then donates into us, and they'll send us the paperwork, say, hey, our company wants to support you, sign up here, fill this out. And now we have a little bit more support coming in on a regular basis. So just being able to, and there are people out here that still want to see, as wide of a reach as the documentary has already had, there are so many people who are still like, when is the next showing going to be, and when can we see it again? And we really want to show it. And I've had teachers that want to show it in schools as part of some kind of curriculum. And the schoolwork is so paramount. Like, even if you were as a college student, whatever I can almost, there are so many majors that you might be studying right now that you can go and impact a nonprofit or some kind of community work, whether you be telling stories or using you're really good with, you're nice with spreadsheets and numbers, you can go and volunteer and intern with a nonprofit that's small and needs some help with their back end organization work. So all of that work is valuable, and then you can use that to bolster your resume and to go on to do whatever it is that you are dreaming of becoming, right? So many ways to get involved. And but storytelling is I don't want to call it a lost art. It's just, it is very important that the real stories of the people in communities, especially people who are working together despite differences, despite what may seem like insurmountable odds, because it is like all of nature is a collaborative effort. Nothing exists in a vacuum, and we truly do need each other to make all of these things happen. Like the whole, I'm a self-made this and that is not necessarily the truth. And so it takes the network, and our storytellers are so important. So having this, I'm truly grateful to EJ for him putting this together, and like seeing us and seeing the potential in it. We have a farm space that we are about to start building, and I'm hoping to bring EJ back into it to help document the process of doing this, so that we can then use that to pass on to other groups in other cities, or even here right in our city, that want to go about the process of putting together a community farm space. So now they would have a blueprint that they can easily go and look at, So that's the kind of impact that it has had, and that we hope for it to continue to have within this community and communities beyond ours.
I think we have a quotable moment, and that moment is all of nature is a collaborative effort. That was absolutely profound, and I think that it gives us an opportunity to really grow and go and go forward in really being able to see some systemic change in this particular area. As we wrap up, EJ, I'm going to ask you to give us final thoughts. And for those who are looking to use their talents and their gifts to evoke change, specifically in filmmaking and storytelling, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, just to go back real quick to what you said, Danielle. Yeah, Ples was giving me a lot of quotable moments. I was like, let me start writing some of this stuff down. I love speaking to Ples, always great wisdom. I would just say my biggest things, I just want to encourage people to really document and tell your stories and own your stories, right? Because we need more of that. For so long, marginalized communities and voices have not been a part of storytelling. And I think it's really a great moment right now. We're seeing a lot of people really getting into this space. And so I would say that to start with what you have, like before I got to filmmaking, I was, taking photos on my cell phone in Louisiana to document things. And that kind of led to other avenues, but to definitely look at your community, your stories, and thinking what's important, stories that, you have access to, that you may be close to, that others may not. And so what is being missed about those stories? What is being missed about those communities? When people talk about, that's really where my love came out of the storytelling, was really documenting Oak Cliff. And so, and a lot of folks here in the Dallas area will speak on Oak Cliff, but might not have actual ties to Oak Cliff and don't know what Oak Cliff looks like. And so for me, it was like going to my friends, birthdays and stuff, and documenting their family, and going to my grandmother's house and documenting what she's doing, and church anniversaries, and really seeing the humanity in our communities. And I think that is something that we need more of. So I want to encourage folks to look at your talent skills that so many folks, whether it's photography, videography, writing, and looking at how you can document those stories now. We need more of that. And then thinking about how you share those stories and being intentional about how you share those stories and making sure they're preserved for generations to come.
Excellent. Well, on behalf of Thompson Hospitality, we want to just tip our hat to both Ples and EJ for the work that you all are doing in the Dallas area. And we stand in agreement with you that it's going to be a blueprint that can be used across the country and around the globe. Continue to do the work that you're doing. For those of you guys who are tuned in, we will have the contact information of both Ples and EJ down in our notes so that you can go and connect with them and be a part of what they're doing. And remember, like Ples said, all of nature is a collaborative effort, and it starts with us working together. So we want to thank you for watching today's episode of Chef Talk. We'll be back next month with our final episode of the semester.